Welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Connections Podcast. So glad you would join us. And, it's still blowing my mind. We're still early here. This is season 6. We are actually in our 6th year of doing the Gill Connections Podcast. For maybe there's some new people listening. We always get new listeners in the new year for some reason. My name is Mike Cunningham. My official title is National Business Development Manager here at Gill Athletics. Really long title that really all that means is I'm the podcast guy. I'm the guy who hosts the podcast here for going into our 6th year. It's really quite amazing. This started back in January of 2020, so right before COVID, and had some really, really trustworthy people come along this journey with me and be our guest for something that didn't exist. There was no long form interview type podcast out there for track and field, and specifically track and field coaches that didn't focus on the X's and O's and stuff like that. So truly grateful for those guys and gals that joined us super early in the podcast. And now we're getting close to episode 300, which means we've had well over 300 coaches on the podcast. And I'm going to be real truthful with you. I'm still excited today, episode whatever, as we get close to 300, as I was episode 1. I'm just better prepared. It sounds better. Like if you go back and listen to episode 1, I can't believe it was really literally just my phone. But I'm super excited about each and every one of our guests because I love to learn about the people who choose to become track coaches. It's an invaluable, immeasurable value profession out there. And I'm just excited to be a small piece of the puzzle here with the podcast to help amplify, uplift, and honor those men and women who choose to be track and field coaches. So let's hop in to today so behind the scenes here, you're listening to this in 2025, or what's crazy, you could be listening to this in 2035. I'll have no idea. Maybe if it's 2035 and if Twitter still exists, that might be doubtful. Hit me up. Let me know that this still is going in 2035, that you're still listening. But it's 2025 when you're hearing this. But we're actually, because this is how reality works, we're actually recording this back in October of 2024. So you may hear us talk about, we're going to kind of slip in and out of time travel. We're going to talk about what happened in convention in December, even though it hasn't happened. We're going to have a little fun with that. But help me welcome the new head coach of LeTourneau University down in beautiful Texas. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Dillon May. Dillon, how are you, sir?
Mike, I'm great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've long-time listener, first-time caller with the podcast, and I'm humbled and honored to be on this. I feel like it just, you reached out to me about as you're doing being real good at your job, reaching out to me about supplies and some upcoming updates and building projects for the university and what our needs are. And yeah, you just invited me to be on, and I'm just excited to get to be on this podcast that so many incredible and great coaches have also been on.
I can't wait. I appreciate that sentiment, Dillon. Thank you so much for that. And I'm always grateful when our hosts sit through the 2 to 3 minute intro that I do as well, because you're just kind of like, all right, when are we going to get started here? So super grateful for that. I hope one day that it's not special to get on the podcast. And what I mean by that is this is a little bit like Pokemon to me, meaning I want to catch them all. I want to get every track coach, high school, college, it doesn't matter. First year, 70th year, I want them on the podcast. So one day I'm going to be really, really close, and it's going to be like, well, thanks for having me. I'm finally, I'm guest number, 20,462, Mike. You finally got to me. Hopefully it'll be that one day, but I only get 52 a year. So that's going to be a ways in the future. So as we celebrate season 6, I can't wait to celebrate season 60 one day as well to get here. So appreciate that and appreciate you deciding to be here. And, a little known secret, not everybody accepts my invitation, by the way. I do get turned down. I know as a recruiter, you never get turned down. I get it. But for me, I do. Some people, and I, no judgment. I respect that some people don't want to be recorded. It's being on camera and voice and all that kind of stuff. I get that. Other people, here's what I think happens the majority of the time. Other people, I think, don't believe they deserve it, don't believe they've either coached long enough or haven't coached whatever level of success they think. I haven't coached an Olympian, I haven't coached a national champion, I haven't coached an All-American, whatever, blah, 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 all these kind of things. And it's complete garbage. It's complete garbage. If you take up the mantle of becoming a track and field coach, high school, middle school, college, professional, summer club, I don't care. If you are affecting young people as a track coach, therefore in a positive manner, you deserve to be on the show. It's that simple. It's a pretty, it's not, I almost said it was a pretty low bar, but to actually be a track coach, it's a pretty high bar. So it actually is a high bar, but
Yeah.
you've accepted that title of coach. And so I want you on here. And so I'm glad to have you on here today, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Dillon, let's hop into it, man. I'm really excited. I love learning about new people and their journeys and showing to our listeners, the different ways. You mentioned you've listened to a couple episodes, so you've heard a couple of different ways that people got into coaching. Let's get started with you, Dillon. Somewhere, assuming that you were an athlete, track and field had to start for you somewhere. Where does track start for you?
Yeah. If you just look on paper, as in like when did my name first show up on a roster? Would have been my junior year of high school. Going out for the team. I'd ran cross country beforehand. I started running cross country my freshman year. Where I grew up, we had a pretty good cross country program at my high school. And this is Greater Seattle area, Maple Valley, Washington. I went to Tahoma High School, and if you're from Washington State and you're familiar with the state track and field championship, let me just clarify. There's Mount Tahoma High School in Tacoma, but I went to Tahoma, just plain old Tahoma.
No Mount.
So we did not host the state championship every year, but we'll for all the for the 4A to 2A or 4A to 1A schools. But we had a pretty good track program, and I had done cross country. I played for cross country. Let's see, I didn't play sport in 8th grade. Before that, played football a couple years. Couple interceptions at practice. That was probably a highlight of my career. I played in the 5th quarter, which was the middle halftime quarter, where if you weren't going to play during the game, the coaches would put you in during halftime to play for like 15 minutes. Had a touchdown saving tackle. It's pretty cool.
Whoa. Hold on, Dillon. Hold on, Dillon. I come from the land. You're in Texas now, so you have full right to
yeah,
here. Yeah. But I come from the land of high school football, Alabama. I've never heard this. Hold on a second. In halftime, the coaches would, I assume both coaches, visiting team and home team, would pull out a few non-starters, and you would play like a mini scrimmage essentially during halftime on the field.
So take non-starter and elevate it to non-player. And like I'm on the roster, right? I'm showing up to practice, got all my gear, working hard. And I mean, like, I became a cross country guy. Guess what part of practice I was the best at? Conditioning, right? So, hey, coach, you want us to run a lap around the field, follow the fence all the way around? I got you. I'll be first. So yeah, like I'm talking. I didn't play in 8th grade. So I did play middle school for a year. Yeah. So this was like the cities. Like Maple Valley, Washington, we had the Maple Valley Raiders. That's who we played for. And we go play Puyallup and Enum. Oh man, Puyallup was so good. But we play Enumclaw and Kent, a couple of the other cities of like 5th and 6th graders, or 4th or 5th graders. So I did that for a couple of years, and that's when I played the 5th quarter. Like you said, it was a scrimmage, and each team, guys who weren't, or I shouldn't say guys, the boys who weren't going to play, that's when I get to hop in and play. And but you know what? I just feel like they weren't ready for my game at that point in my life. I was a lockdown cornerback. Put me on an island, a real Richard Sherman before Richard Sherman. That's just not a big part of the game in 5th grade. So I feel like maybe if I was growing up now, flag football maybe a little bit more involved. But it was good little time in my life.
I have never heard of this halftime thing. I mean, literally never, ever have heard of this. Up until junior year, not dissimilar to you, Dillon, there was no way I was ever getting into a game. And I just sat on the sideline all game and never got into a game. At halftime, we went inside, and it was so funny because, the offense would be over there and the defense would be over there on the whiteboards. And I'd be like, what do I need to pay attention for, bro? I'm not getting in. Like, what are we doing here? I don't need to even be here. Like, you want me to serve some snacks or something? I don't know. No, I love this picture that you painted though, because you're the conditioning guy, you're the cross country guy. So do a lap, and I could see because I've been in high school. I've been part of a football team. We've also had to do these things, and we find like you want to talk about having a kid stretch their creativity and intelligence, have them run a lap. They will look for and find every corner to cut. Like they will. I mean, if there's an inch to save, they will find it. And I can see you following the exact line, and everybody like, bro, you could have just cut. Like, what are you doing? You're killing because coach is seeing you. What are you doing? Get over here. Yeah, I could just see. You may not be in the most popular person during conditioning time for football.
Oh yeah, I'm just here to follow orders and follow directions,
I
and
love it.
I'm a rule follower to a T, I guess, at
Oh
the end of the
man.
day. But
So, so
yeah, it's football for a little while, and
r-
lacrosse. That was kind of the jam there through middle school and going into high school. That's why, track. I had friends who did track in the spring, but my sister got me plugged into lacrosse. I think like right as I was like coming into it, they started us in third grade, play full contact too. And then you got to fifth grade and they like dialed back the contact. But
wow.
um yeah, so we started in third and fourth grade. And that's why that was my spring sport. And so I did that up until ninth grade. And that's when I went out for cross country for the first time. But I still did lacrosse in the spring and then cross country my sophomore year. And then I was taking French, and my French teacher, she said, "Hey, if anyone wants extra credit, which I mean, I'm all over, an extra credit opportunity. If anyone wants extra credit, rugby is really popular. It's a very popular sport in France, and my husband is going to do a rugby camp. And so if you want extra credit, you can go to the camp, and experience a sport that's important to French culture." Looking back, I think she was just trying to, promote the camp a little bit, help her husband out, get a couple more people there. But I went, I loved it, and I played rugby for a year, which at least in Washington State, spring sport. Started a state championship game, also got pulled out at halftime, and rugby's like soccer, where once you sub out, that's it. But um, yeah, it was a good time, and gaining an appreciation for the sport of rugby and rugby sevens, and then after picking up a couple concussions in lacrosse, a concussion in rugby, my brother-in-law sat me down and was like, "Hey, listen, let's do a sport that you can do for the rest of your life." And I'm like, "Well, Joey, there's guys who are in their 60s and 70s playing rugby still." And he's like, "Well, hey, hold on, slow down. How many teeth do they have? How do their fingers look?" Uh, and uh, and that's where Joey convinced me to go and run track, and it was really just like things clicked once I went out for track. And I remember junior year, after running cross country season, I was a JV guy. I remember that first run my freshman year. First practice was the classic cross country experience. We go and do warm up. I don't know what I'm doing, so I go run with the top guys for the warm up. It's 2 miles out and back, out to the stop sign and back, and we get back, and I'm like, man, what a great practice. That was a good time, good run. I'm ready. Think I'll come back tomorrow. And then my friend Eric, he tells me, no, like that was a warm up. Now we're running hills, and our hill was it was about 400 meters long, and at least in my memory, it's pretty steep. And it was as simple as run to the top, come back down, run to the top, come back down. When you need water, take a water break, but just don't stop running and run hard on your way up. And you can go as slow as you want coming down, but it has to be at least a jog. And we did that, man. It was probably like 20 minutes that we did that, 15 or 20 minutes for. Um, but yeah, did that, and then did the cool down again, and then did core, 10-minute core routine, 6-minute stretch routine at the end of every practice in high school. I remember going home, my mom picked me up, and both my legs from the hips to my feet cramping up on the ride home. And I was like, wow, I'm so excited for tomorrow. And came back the next day. It was a 5 mile run. Took me like, I think it took me an hour to do that 5 mile run. And I think like and that was the shortest run that you could do at my high school program. Um, and I think like the real kind of like the cool, like poetic moment of that is then thinking about going and running in college. It's a 5 mile race. And it's like, man, thinking about how like my very first run ever, 5 mile run took me over an hour, and now I'm running 8Ks, and running and racing on a competitive level at the, on the college level. And yeah, it was just kind of a full circle moment, kind of getting college, be like, wow, all right, 8K, let's figure this out.
I love the variety, like really unique variety. We have a lot of coaches who, have done baseball, football, basketball, a bunch of different, call it normal sports, if you will, like sports I can just turn on right now and I
Mhm.
know a lot about. But lacrosse and rugby, by the way, I also took French class, and I don't remember like
Mhm.
rugby being taught like this integral to French culture here at all, by the way. So, yeah, that sounds like that was some kind of grade fixing, money laundering. I don't know, something's going on there. I don't want to. Hopefully, the statute of limitations are over for her, and she's not in trouble. But yeah, that seems a little shady there. So you how we go on tangents because I'm a tangent guy, right? How many years or semesters did you take French?
I took it 3 years. So my high school or my school district, elementary, when I was in kindergarten, sixth graders got moved to middle school. So it's K through 5 for elementary. Middle school was 6 and 7. Then they had junior high for eighth and ninth. And then they had high school 10 through 12. And so when you were a freshman, sometimes you had to catch the bus from the junior high to the high school. Or for us, cross country, we always practiced at the junior high school because the trail system in Maple Valley, you had super easy access compared to the high school it was kind of far away and there weren't great running routes. I mean, we made it happen during track. But yeah, we would all go down to the junior high school and yeah, it was when I got to French, they offered that starting as a sophomore, so that was at the high school level, and that's how I got plugged in. I did French my sophomore, junior, and then senior year. I did like a dual enrollment French class, and then I got to college, the University of Montana, rolled right in French. I was excited to keep going, and it was just like groundbreaking. It was a lot, and I remember going into the final. I had no idea where my grade was. And I talked to the professor. I'm like, hey, Professor Valentine, I just wanted to check in. And he said, whoa, 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 en français, ask me in French. I was like, no, I really don't. I don't think I'm there. And but I just want to ask him where my grade was. And he's like, where your grade is. I'm like, I don't. That's why I'm asking. And I go in the final, I'm first generation college student. I don't know how finals and dropping in class and everything like that works. So I take the final and I reach out like in the general all freshmen at the university Facebook page. And I asked like, is it too late to drop a class after you take the final? Because I just took my French final. I feel like it didn't go well. And one of my teammates just immediately was like, no, you're locked in. Yeah. And I was like, well, all right. Looks like I'm go ahead and write my tombstone now. That's it. Bury dig the grave. And I finished I think with a B plus. Because when my professor asked me, well, you know what your grade is. What do you think your grade is? I told him, oh, I don't know, like probably like a B or a B plus. He's like, yeah. So I wonder, and like going on 5 years or 2019, that was fall freshman year, so it's 24. So yeah, 5 years now, thinking, man, if I would have just said an A, yeah, I think I have an A. If that would have been it, if that would have settled the score right then
Right.
and there. But I loved French. I loved taking it. And it was the only foreign language that I took, but it got me plugged into rugby for a year and again appreciation for that.
Yeah,
But
no.
my brother did track, and I wish uh like my brother, he threw shot disc, and he was a sprinter, and he ran cross country too, and like I just wish for now, like if I were to have gotten the chance to coach my brother, I just wish I could have tried to coach him
Mm,
into the multi,
mm.
and into the combined events a little bit too, because it's like he's got the build for it, he's got the background, it's all right there. I'm not saying that he would have been conference score or anything like that. But man, he's doing 5 events when he goes to a track meet in high school. Like we're there basically. So my brother, he's the one. He's 7 years older than me, and I looked up to him all growing up and still do. Um, but he started doing track. Let's see, when he was a freshman, he would have been like 14 or 15. So I was like 7 or 8 years old. And so it took me a while to get into it, but he ran cross country too. And so that's what put cross country and track on my radar. my mom ran cross country. Well, no, they didn't have cross country in Central Montana, but she did track. And yeah, definitely between my mom, big runner in the family, and that was all in me. So I knew football wasn't going to last forever, but cross country was where it got into it, and then kind of track followed when I was like, I want to be good, and I think I got to go year round. And it was a great time. I asked my coach when I went out for track for the first time, Coach, I want to be really good at cross country. What do I need to do in track? Because I don't know what events there are. And he said, well, definitely the 3,200. It's like, yep, I've heard that's the longest. That makes a lot of sense. And he said, but let's also do the 8. I was like, okay, yeah, sounds great to me. No knowledge, no prior, perspectives on the opinions of the 800 and how people feel about it. I think it was my second meet. He puts me in the 800 and the 32. I'm like, awesome. Sounds like a great time. I go out around the 8. And, I remember coming down the home stretch, like starting to get tunnel vision, the black starting to come in from the outer of my vision as I come down the home stretch and I finish. And I'm like, wow, that was hard. One of the hardest things I've ever done. I'm going to go chill over here for a little bit. And so I'm just hanging out on the infield, opposite end, like at the 200-meter start line. So that's where we put all our stuff and hanging out. And then one of my teammates runs over and it's like, Dillon, the 3,200 is we're on the starting line. Get your spikes on. I was like, I haven't even caught my breath from the 8, man. Like, and so pull over, get on the start line, run 3,200. My experience of the worst event in track, at least as a high schooler, is I love the 800. It's great. 32 is the one that's so challenging. And that was the only 3,200 I ran in high school. Was my junior year, second meet. I told my coach, I think I just want to focus on the 8. Like, I think I got a good thing going there. And he's like, okay, yeah, sounds good. So yeah, stuck with the 800, and actually we made like a plea bargain deal on it. He told me if I ran a certain time that I wouldn't need to run the 32 again. And I didn't make that time in the next meet, so I ran it again. I was like, all right, well, can we put all my eggs in on the 8? And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll let you. So turned into a pretty decent high school 800 runner, and especially for a guy who was just a JV cross country guy. But yeah, I was like going out for track. That senior cross country season, totally different. And then that senior track season, I feel like is kind of the one that got me kind of like the tryout offer at the University of Montana. And that's kind of where things carried on from there.
So before we get to college, one quick thing that really struck out to me, I love that story of when you're in college and you're like, oh, I think I bombed my French final. Hey guys, can I, what's the drop dead date here? Which, as adults, we can look back and be like, oh, well, that was just the dumbest question in the world because you way missed that, right? But
we're way past it.
But what I love about that is, it's sometimes as adults, whether you've been coaching for 5 years, 50 years, somewhere in between, we sometimes forget that we are dealing with kids, whether they're first-time college kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if your whole family had gone to college. It still was your first time going to college. So we take some of these things for granted, like, oh, of course our kids know the drop dead dates, or that they have to stay at 12 credit hours. I assume that's still a rule. It's been a while, but all these things that we just like assume. Of course, you should either know it or you should know it. This is NCAA. I love this line sometimes on social media. High school is boys and girls. College, it's men and women, and you're going to be treated like that. And that's cool. But that 18-year-old was still 18 3 months ago when they were their senior in high school. So let's have some grace here and help kids out. So I just love that story of like the naivety, and it's cute, and I love it because it's like, well, that's normal. That's a lot of 18-year-olds going around. There's a lot of 20-year-olds going around that have no idea of simple things. I just really, that story kind of stuck out to me as far as grace for our athletes.
Yeah, one thing in recruiting that I'm blown away by is, I'll be talking to a senior, and I'll see him with their team. I'm like, man, talking to a grown man right here. This kid's ready to go college level pop off, right? And then they come in as a freshman. I'm like, you're a child. Like, what happened here? And it's just comparing them when they're high school, they're an 18-year-old compared to 14-year-olds on their team. They get to college and they're an 18-year-old compared to 22, 23. I don't know if we still have any COVID people who are seventh year, right? But yeah, it's I feel like something I come back to a lot is, yeah, I was a first generation college student. I had no idea what I was doing. First generation, definitely first one to do athletics at the collegiate level too, between me and my siblings. And yeah, try to have some grace and some humility when, our first years come in, and they just don't understand a drop, what the difference between a drop and a withdraw, and that a W is just a W,
Right.
doesn't impact GPA at all, and the importance of those dates, and just trying to help them. We're Microsoft Suite, right? So just trying to help them, get them plugged into their Outlook
Right.
when they get here, and just those little things. I found so much, like, how many different hats do you wear as a coach, right? And I feel like I can spend my hour and a half session out with throws, hanging out there. I have my coaching hat on. Sometimes I'll have my programming hat on. Sometimes I put my strength and conditioning hat on. But also sometimes I have to put my counselor hat on. And sometimes that's counselor in like more of a emotional capacity. Sometimes the counselor in terms of an academic capacity. And just going through and making sure we're tracking progress. And I mean, Division 3 level, you're gonna be involved a lot, way more in the compliance side and the
Mhm.
academic side. But everyone is going to wear that hat, one way or another. And yeah, I think that's just one of those things of, yeah, you get into coaching and something I'll kind of tell people when they ask me, oh, what do you do for your job, is, well, the coaching part's really fun, going to meets, hanging out at meets, practice, everything like that. If it was just that, I don't know. I think they have to find a way to like make you earn your full-time employment status, right? So they got to throw some administrative stuff on your plate, and they got to throw some meetings on with the rest of the university on your plate too, just to make it. Well, hey, we need to make it a full-time job. You may, bring them down a little bit, make them experience what the rest of us go through, in order to earn our benefits package. But I think the more I can just try to live in that and embrace it and look for ways to highlight that and make sure that my athletes know that that's something that they can come to me and my coaching staff for, the more of a holistic approach we'll have with the program as well.
So go back to high school for me, as you become more entrenched into track and field and cross country, so your junior and senior years, where was, if at all, was coaching at all in your mind? And as a related question to that, what was the relationship with your coach in regards to, like, did you ask a lot of questions of like, well, so hey, why are we doing this workout? Not in a negative way, but like you literally want to learn, like you're just
Mm-hmm.
curious about it. Why did you put me in the 8 and the 32 when they're back to back, things like that? Or was it more, which this is the more common, I think, we're talking about in your junior, senior year, we're talking about 17, 18-year-olds. Yeah, I was 17, 18 years old, man. Coach told me to go run. I ran. Coach told me to do this. I did this. I was much more compliant, which that's the bulk of our kids out there. But for you, who we know end up being a track coach, was there any kind of natural curiosity of the, call it the art and science of coaching itself at that point?
Yeah, I would say I never asked why. Um, Usually I felt like I was too far back, to ask, to try to get my coach for a couple seconds, and not out of like a meritocracy standpoint, more of like from a practical standpoint of like, by the time I'm finishing, my coach is like getting varsity onto their cool down and moving on to the next thing. Like, I just don't have time. They don't have the time for me to interrupt them. Which I'm sure, like, knowing Jeff Brady now, he would have been absolutely fine with it. But um, yeah, I think for me, like, I'm a very structure oriented person, and detail oriented. And so it was more of like, just like kind of understand like one case. I think the question I did ask why was like about rest, and hey, like, while my partner is running their 1K, why am I actively jogging the entire time? And and like, why would I do, or when would I do shorter rests? And what a why question was, is why is varsity getting to run that fast? I feel like I can run that fast. And that was a question. Well, the answer was, well, show me in a race. and um, and I think by my senior year or when I went out for track my junior year and then going into my senior year, and just trying to piece it all together, and my coaches explaining the importance of training year round, like that's where it really started to click with me in that regard. But I think going back to like the structure piece and detail oriented piece of understanding difference between Ks and miles, and this is when we do a fartlek, and this is when we do a tempo, and what is the goal of a tempo run, because it's just my least favorite workout. But I don't know, but I'm sure there's a reason why we do it. Or like the whys of understanding pacing, right? Like I was in high school right before, or like right as GPS watches were getting really popular, and or maybe not popular, but more accessible would be the right way. So like some of my teammates would have GPS, but most of us didn't. And so it was like, hey, what is pacing for a tempo run? And it's like when you're just out of breath, right? And conversation pace and understanding all those things. Like those are things for me that are really critical in my coaching of the importance of conversation pace. And it all just reflects heart rate and where your heart rate is and sitting in those right heart rate zones. But I think like one thing that sticks out to me in high school, I remember my coach coming back and telling us that he just went and to a big seminar series on the Jack Daniels plan, and that was the first time I heard of Jack Daniels from the coaching perspective. I watched ESPN growing up, so like I saw Jack Daniels commercials all the time, and I was like, well, what was my coach talking about? And him just kind of explaining some of those first principles in the Daniels running formula. And just talking about not necessarily who Jack Daniels was, other than a coach. And I definitely remember noticing when my first coach in high school, Coach Connor, retired, and Coach Brady went from being the associate head coach to the head coach, both of cross country and track. Just trying to like seeing some of those small changes that he made to workout structure, and then also just kind of picking his brain too. I had Coach Brady was my Algebra 2 teacher when I was a freshman in high school. And so he taught at the junior high rather than at the high school. And yeah, I just remember, I also didn't feel like I had a lot of like relationship background to ask him a lot of those why questions, because in class I got in trouble for talking every day. And so it's like, man, Brady's on me every day. I don't want to come to practice and keep picking his brain. And yeah, it was just one of those things. But, I think like where I got into coaching and where like kind of where that coaching fire kind of came from, I would say it was something that was on my mind for pretty much all my life. I go back to a little video game called NFL Head Coach 2005 that I played on my parents' computer when I was growing up. And man, our computer crashed all the time. And so I like could barely make any progress because I'd create my coach, and we start coaching in the season, and then the computer crashed and I had to restart. But this is one of those things like I don't know why, but that just the everything behind the scenes, everything behind putting together an NFL roster, and like I played NCAA football growing up, I played Madden growing up, 2K, all those sports games. Probably my favorite part, I've been a Seattle sports fan my whole life. I grew up in the area. Historically bad, or maybe more just historically mediocre, right? And so I always had the opportunity to go in, take over the Seattle Seahawks, and then sign free agents, cut these guys, make these trades. Man, like when the Rams won the Super Bowl a couple years ago, I'm getting rid of all my draft picks. I'm going in on this year. Also because attention span, man, I'm not going to play long enough to draft next year. So I'm just going to trade all my draft picks, get in the best team. Get the depth chart in line. And that was the part that was the most exciting for me, like playing those video games, was just like that restorative component and building a team. And I feel like, not that that's what coaching is in the least, it's a small part of it. But for me, I was way more interested in like building that roster and getting that roster set and finding talent, and getting that piece together rather than like actually playing Madden, and like playing the actual game. I just want to put the roster together, get my Seahawks to the Super Bowl and win some titles. But yeah, I was like kind of through that. And I remember when I was playing lacrosse, like I drop plays and bring it to practice and give them to my coach. My coach was like, "Oh, thank you," and put them in his pocket. That's last time we ever saw it. But just for whatever reason, like that was something that was always on my mind. And as we kind of got into high school and my upperclassmen years in high school, and I kind of figured out, hey, pretty decent at cross country and track, especially when I, leaving high school, getting to college too. That's where I started asking a lot of those questions, not so much of why are we doing this workout, but how did you become a coach? Like that's what I love about this podcast is I wish I had it growing up so many times because what you learn on it is that there's no direct path. A lot of people go like high school route and they teach, and that's what I figured I was going to do was I was going to teach math, coach high school, just like Coach Brady when I was in high
Mhm.
school. And he was an elder at my church and was someone that I looked up to in a lot of ways and felt like he had a pretty good life setup, married and had kids and had a happy family and coached cross country and track and traveled with the team and everything of that nature. And felt like something that I was interested in as well. So, I went to a college. You'd think most people would then study kinesiology or sports management, and I studied math. But it was a good time. I enjoyed it, and it was a lot of just picking my coach in college, Vicky Pounds, picking her brain on how she became a coach. And it was like, well, I was a professional runner, and then I became a coach. I was like, all right, sounds like I need to become a professional runner. And I was good. I was not great for Division One, but yeah, I think it was just trying to connect or collect as many stories and, just hear from so many different people and how they got into it. And my college coaches, that's really where I started asking that why question more so. Why are we doing this workout and how do we structure mileage? And why did you get into coaching and how did you get into coaching?
Knowing that not just because you're a great athlete will make you a great coach. There's actually some sentiment that the exact opposite is true, because most of
Mm-hmm.
our elite professional athletes in any sport, but we're talking track here. There's a lot of God-given talent, right? There's a lot of genetics, and so some things come a little bit more natural to people who end up making it to the Olympics and those kind of things. And so it may be hard to translate that to the ninth grade freshman who can't, stereotypically chew bubble gum and tie their shoe at the same time, type of thing, right? But you just mentioned Vicky Pounds as your coach. Did
Mm-hmm.
you? You have hindsight today, right? You can look back and see it. It may have been very hard for you to understand as a 17, 18-year-old kid. And maybe touch on this a little bit too. Maybe as a 17, 18-year-old boy being coached by a woman, um, did you have any sense of like, oh, wow, like she's done what maybe I want to do. Maybe we all dream as an 18-year-old that we're going to make the Olympics no matter how good or how bad we might actually be. But was there ever like a sense of like, man, I've got something maybe a little different than my other peers at other schools have. I have someone who's done it. I should pay attention more. I should pick her brain more, and anything like that. Or was it just like, bro, I went to practice, and again, I was told to run 2 miles, I ran 2 miles.
Yeah, I would say so. I remember going to Vicky's office one time and talking goals and talking where I want to go. And I just remember telling her, Vicky, I like when I was a freshman in high school, I never thought I would make varsity. Here's the funny part of the story. I ran one varsity race my entire cross country career because my team was so good. Like we had a state championship team in high school. By the end of my senior year cross country, I was a sub 17 guy. I was a 16. I think I ran like 16:55 or 52 or something like that. Hey, I think for a lot of teams, like they'd love to have that as their number seven or their number five, like right in there at the high school level. But for me, I was 20 seconds from our number seven,
Wow.
and our number seven was a freshman, and like from that high school team, a lot of those guys, pretty much all but one ran in college, and the one who didn't, he could have, he didn't want to. But everyone one else ran in college, and I ran D2 or D1. A lot of like some of them ran at Utah State, Colorado State, Eastern Washington. I went to the University of Montana. And then D2, we had a guy go to Central Washington as well,
Wow.
guy who went to Army. And yeah, so it was like, I wasn't just on any high school team. I didn't realize it. I think if there was anything I didn't really realize it in the moment, it was how ridiculously talented that team was. At Tahoma, we just had, we were going for state championships. And my freshman year, I think the guys won it. Forget if the women won. I think the women won one, maybe like my sophomore or junior year. I mean, on the, my same class, like we had a girl who ran at Florida too. And it's just like, yeah, people went
Wow.
to Montana State to go run, and so it's like, that's just the bar,
Yeah.
and but I remember I was telling all this to Vicky in her office, and like, I didn't even think I could make varsity, and here I am as a Division I runner, so I'm not gonna come out and say that like, you know, let's just see what happens. Like I want to go to the next level. I want to run professional. I want to go to the Olympics. And Vicky, she's like, listen, I'm always gonna be supportive of my athletes and their dreams and their visions. But I think we just need to have a conversation about, people who are running in the Olympics. What are they running in college? Like little realistic expectations there. She didn't want to see me, set my expectations too high and get crushed. And I have so much respect for her and how she handled that conversation of like, okay, I know the level I was at. And Dylan, walk on guy, not a scholarship guy. These are his dreams. Never gonna tell anyone no. But let's kind of look at those levels a little bit and what it takes. But she was just incredible. She was incredible in how she coached each one of us. And yeah, to your point, it was like I have someone who, man, Canadian national record holder at one point in the 800. Like that's not just anybody that is my coach in college. So yeah, every chance I could get, I wanted to pick her brain and just kind of just hear her stories and her journey and people she ran against. I mean, one of her like fiercest foes on the Canadian national circuit, uh, she lived in Missoula and coached at Big Sky High School. And I volunteered at Big Sky High School a little bit too, like with their coaching. And that's kind of like the first official coaching role that I had, was just volunteering with them in the summertime. But even talking with Dee, and the head coach there, she ran for Seattle Pacific University. And yeah, it was just like, man, in little old Missoula, Montana, we got a handful of former D1, collegiate runners who are now coaches in the area, and some of them ran nationally for Canada too, and ran against each other, and had some pretty good stories of racing against one another. And I was just there to soak all of it up. And even like Brian Schwain, who is the director of the program at Montana, like talking to him about his journey into coaching too. And I think the difficult part for me in that moment was, all right, so Brian Schwain, Team USA level decathlete, right? Competed for Montana State, taught in West Yellowstone, taught science for a couple of years. It's like, okay, that's relatable. I want to go be a teacher as well and do that. And he was like, yeah, after a couple of years, I was just like, man, I think I'd rather train pro. So I did. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm not quite to that level. Or like Vicky, like how many times was she an All-American in Alabama, right? Like you walk into her office and there's a picture of her winning winning a relay at Penn Relays, right? And I'd never heard of Penn Relays before. And I was like, oh, I guess that's a big deal. Right. And and then she went and ran for Canada and everything like that. It's like, okay, I feel like everyone on our coaching. Um, Coach Renault, Paul Renault, he ran the Olympics for Belize. He was in the same heat as Carl Lewis, right? And it was like, okay, so like Olympians or national level athletes are all Americans. If you want to be a coach in college, that's what it takes. So I guess I'm just gonna go coach high school. And that's what I was happy with, but every opportunity that I had, I wanted to go and pick their brains and just hear stories and maybe advocate for a little bit why I should be on scholarship. But just to hear from them. And I think at some point they kind of told me, Dylan, you have to stop coming by our office because we have work to do. That's how often I was coming by. And so then I've learned the value of setting up an appointment, and all that too, and setting those professional expectations that us as coaches we kind of do with our athletes a little bit as well. But yeah, it was just incredible. The coaches that I had at Montana and their level of expertise and experience and who I just got to talk to about their journey in that regard.
I once heard that to be a good multi-athlete decathlon or a decathlon, the athlete has to be a gym rat because there's just so many different events. And so you just got to be someone who just loves to work out and improve and work on this
Hmm.
event or this event, this event. I love how we're getting to this. We've never said this before, but for coaching, you became the office rat. You were always in the office. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, look, man, we love you and all, but I got to actually, like, there's some work I got to do. The NCAA makes me here. I love that. It's so cool. So speed us up here just a little bit for time constraints. So it seems like, this is not uncommon. So would that make it common? We've heard this story
Hmm.
before, the NCAA or NFL video game, football and things like that, where coaches are like, now that I
Yep.
look back on it, all my friends love to play the quarterback and the receiver, but I like to do the recruiting side or the drafting side or the head coaching side. Like it's interesting how not every kid likes that part of it, but some do. And I wonder I wish there could be like a study done of how many of those kids go on to become teachers and coaches. Like that'd be really interesting, actually. Like maybe that needs to be on the interview. It's like, hey, so did you play football as a kid? What part did you like the best? Oh, you like to be the receiver? Oh, you're not on my staff. Sorry, you're not going to make it. So I love that. So it seems like the time at Montana. So you've had this bend towards coaching. Track kind of helps maybe solidify, like, oh, okay, it's going to be coaching in track and field. So I'm going to go become a teacher. You study math, which I don't know why anybody studies math. I can't stand math. Literally, my wife today has about 3 more days left of a long-term sub where she's teaching geometry. So every night she's been coming home. Oh yeah, today we learned it. I'm like, I have no clue. Like, how do you actually want to do this? God bless you for doing that. So you're going to go into high school and high school coaching. Montana seems to be like this. I don't know. I don't want to say this gelling, but this seems to be where it's really like, okay, yep, I'm going to become a coach. I don't know if I necessarily need to become a high school coach. Oh, wait a minute, but I'm not going to be necessarily an NCAA All-American or Olympian, things like that. As you start getting towards your last year at Montana, you mentioned you did some volunteer coaching at Big Sky High School. What's the first? Did you take a first step into coaching, or did you go divergent and then get back into coaching? What was that first step as you're coming into graduation of college?
Yeah. So something Vicky did really well with our program was tough love. And I guess like if we get away from a cliche and kind of piece that out a little bit, what does that look like? I would think, just holding us to high standards, but giving us high support as well. And with that being said, also being transparent with us. So I'm like we had an assistant coaching position at UM that was for specific for the cross country team, and it was a part-time position. And that was something that I was keenly aware of because at my junior and senior year, the person in that position, my senior year, she was transitioning out because she actually got a job offer at her alma mater, Carroll College in Helena, Montana. And so I was like, hey, like that kind of seems like things are lining up. God's opening some doors for me. This is something I've been praying about. I've been really excited about. I'd love to coach in my alma mater. And I remember talking to Vicky about that position, and she told me no pretty quickly because she didn't feel like I was ready for it. And she thought I was just too close with everyone on the team. There's people who make that transition, they do really well. Vicky, just from knowing me, knowing my personality, she didn't think I was ready. And that was hard to hear in the moment, but it's something that I'm so grateful for too. And her knowing me, knowing my journey, knowing who I am, being like, no, he's not ready for it. Um, and so that's where I've just prayed about it. I felt like God closed that door and what doors were opening, the opportunity to move to Boulder, Colorado and teach at Erie High School and coach there and, kind of go that route. And I taught geometry and pre-calc for 2 years, and geometry is a wild ride, man. But and if we had more time, I'd jump into Euclidean, non-Euclidean geometry and how that was one of my favorite classes in
I'm
my
just
undergrad.
gonna
But
edit out all that
um,
part right there. I don't even know what he might have cussed at me. I have no clue because it's math terms. I have no idea what's going on.
But yeah, it was kind of that tough love moment of, and she ended up giving that opportunity to one of my teammates who was a grad student and transferred in. Um, and so there was a little bit more separation for her compared to me in that role, coming right in my undergrad and then turn around trying to coach guys who I was teammates with just a year ago. I
Mhm.
mean, you can scroll through TikTok or Instagram Reels or even like YouTube Shorts, and you'll come across videos of like the stereotypical GA who was on the team last year, right? Like I just saw one of those yesterday, and like those conversations. And I think that was something Vicky was very particular about in how she wanted to set up her team and make sure she sets them up for success. So yeah, that position doesn't, that door closes. And there was a guy at Montana State who I knew just from racing against, who was kind of in that college coach circuit a little bit. So I was kind of following along from Strava, actually, is how I was following his journey, Strava and Instagram, of where he was and just kind of that journey. And so that was something that I just kind of kept an eye on from afar of, all right, he's at this school, now he's at this school, and we were the same age, and how did he get into it? But yeah, I went to the doors that open were teaching. I had a lot of offers as a math teacher, but none in Missoula, and I wanted to stay in Missoula too. And I would have loved to stay in Montana, but the offers I was getting just didn't make sense. And so I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I got plugged in with the Boulder Track Club. And Clint Wells became my coach, and Clint ran at CU, and he was an Olympic trials guy in the steeplechase, and steeplechase was my jam for my undergrad. So I was really excited to work with him. And I just got connected with some really, really incredible people in the running community there in Boulder. I mean, you go and move to Boulder, and that's going to be the case for you. But yeah, just between the Boulder Track Club and the church I went to and the people that I met in that regard and the advice that I got about getting into college coaching. I mean, I even bumped into Mark Wetmore up in Rollinsville, and was like, "Hey, Coach Wetmore, you got 5 minutes that I could just pick your brain for a little bit?" Uh, and the advice he gave me about getting into coaching was, don't get married, don't buy a house, and don't get a dog.
Don't
And
wait, wait,
I
wait,
was
wait.
married, and we had
Don't
a dog.
get a dog? I've never heard that one.
Uh, yeah, because it's hard to move if you have a dog. Um, yeah, it just adds to how difficult it is to move because his point that he was trying to make, right? If you're married, it's hard to move. If you have a
Yeah,
dog, it's hard to move. If you buy a house, you got to sell the house, right?
yeah.
And he told me, listen, you're probably gonna go coach you're gonna be a volunteer coach at some school you've never heard of, and then you're gonna get a part-time position at another school you've never heard of in the
Right.
Midwest, and then you're gonna get your first
Yeah,
assistant cross country position at a school in the Northwest. I'm like, well, I'm from the Northwest. I wouldn't mind that.
yeah,
And then you're going to get your first head coaching job.
yeah,
And then you're going to just try to move and move and move and move and move.
yeah.
And yeah, it was just like Boulder. I was coaching high school. I had a great time coaching at the high school level. Had a little success coaching at the high school level too. It's pretty exciting. All circumstantial, right? I just came in at the right time.
Mm.
But yeah, it was a blast and a half living in Boulder and coaching, and I met my wife there, and we had a real great time.
First of all, funny to hear Coach Wetmore give that advice when he was at Colorado for a couple centuries. I
I
think, to
know,
be real frank,
I
there,
know.
I love that. But I do love that awareness of he's like, yeah, I'm a little different here. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it actually is the majority of coaches or if it just seems like the majority of coaches who go to 1,000 different places. And by the way, pointing thumbs here. I was at 5 different places in 10 years, so no, absolutely no judgment from
Mhm.
me. Real quick before we go on from the high school, I think Vicky Pounds was correct. I think it should be against the rules. Like I think there should actually, and I'm not a big like rule guy necessarily as far as like we need more rules, but I don't know how someone can go from their undergrad in the spring of whatever year to becoming the GA or the assistant coach that fall. Like
Mhm.
I know there's a summer in between, but especially distance, there really is no summer. You're still training and communicating, things like that. I don't know how you go, from Friday night being boys with the team because you're on the team, you're playing Xbox and doing, what normal 21, 22, 23-year-old seniors are doing.
Yeah.
And then on Monday, because you have this new position, this GA or full-time assistance position, you're now coach, homeboy. Like, how do you, I don't know, man. I'm not sure. And it's funny, we've had several guests who have done that who've said, yeah, I probably could have handled it a little differently. And that's code word for like, yeah, there are probably some things that we shouldn't have, like, as a coach now, I'd be like, what the are you doing? You can't be doing that, you know? So I literally think it should be like against the rules. Like, you just can't do it. Plus, I think you should go learn. You already had 4 years of learning from that coach, whether you were paying attention or not. On the coaching side, go
Mm-hmm.
learn from someone else as well on that. But I think I like Vicky's attitude, if you will, towards that. Okay, so coach in high school, having some success. I love your humility of like, yeah, let's be real here. Maybe I was just there at the right time. I probably kind of have your eye towards college coaching. You're talking to Coach Wetmore, things like that. What do we do next?
Yeah, so one of the people I was super fortunate to meet when I was in Boulder, uh, in my track club was Jason Simpson. Um, and he's married to Jenny Simpson. And so I got to know the Simpsons really well. We went to the
Yeah.
same church together, and an incredible church, Cornerstone Church there in Boulder. And just talking to Jenny a little bit about, hey, like, what do I need to do? And Wyatt Rhodes was a guy at CU. And so my wife works for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, right? And so she was doing, when we met, she was the campus rep at CU. And I reached out about volunteering a couple days ago. Was actually the like 5-year anniversary of us meeting at a FCA Halloween party where everyone thought I was a student because I was right out of college, right? And I was so flattered that they thought I could be an athlete at CU. but but yeah, it was one of those things where like getting plugged in, meeting Wyatt Rhodes, like Danny Jones, she was a senior that year, if I remember correctly, and like just what an incredible time to come in and help with FCA and get plugged in there, and kind of get between me and Wyatt, like and us knowing the Simpsons and talking to Jason and Jenny just about the people that they've known in running and in coaching and the journey that they've been. And Jenny told me, you have to get to the convention. And it's going to be in Denver. How about that? Like that timing. And then COVID came in and didn't happen in Denver. But yeah, it was one of those things like Jenny really pushed me to go to convention and just start meeting people and networking and growing my network. What I had learned from friends who kind of like the guy who ran at Montana State, Zach Kuhn, and his journey is that like a lot of people, they have to go be a GA. And that's where, again, like I'm so grateful for those 2 years I had as a teacher to get just professional workplace experience, because I applied for a lot of GA positions. And the one that emailed me back was Messiah College out in central Pennsylvania. And so if you're keeping track, we're going Seattle to Montana to Boulder to Pennsylvania. Big move. And I'm married and I have a dog. So there's 2 strikes. And guess what we did in Pennsylvania? We bought a house. There's my 3rd strike on the Wetmore list. So yeah,
you
it was
learned
COVID, so we bought
nothing.
the house sight unseen. Oh yeah, I learned absolutely nothing. But so grateful for the time that I had to talk with him. Those literally 5 minutes up in Rollinsville. But yeah, just getting to go out to Messiah, and that's where I got accepted a GA position. And that's where I kind of learned. I feel like everyone kind of has ties back to Pennsylvania one way or another. Here I am in Colorado. And some of my coworkers was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm from Gettysburg, or my younger sister goes to Messiah," and it's like, "Wow, this is funny how this works out." And one thing that was really cool about Messiah is, I went Division I state university, right? For my undergrad, I thought about going D3 private Christian for my undergrad. I had a lot of friends who went to George Fox, and I, kind of thought about going there. I ended up at the University of Montana, so I thought Messiah was my opportunity to see the complete other end of the spectrum, a small private religiously affiliated university at the Division III level. Like how do we work without scholarship? How does that even happen? And I walk into a program, with Coach Fogelsinger, and this fall is year 31 for him leading that program. And he went there and he took, from when he went there, there were 7 years that he was teaching just across the border in Maryland, Westminster, Maryland. And that's where he met his wife, and he was teaching middle school and high school biology. And then he gets a handwritten letter from his coach saying, "Dale, I'm retiring, and I think you should be the next coach." So he becomes the next coach. And that's the program that I walk into, a guy who's been there almost 30 years when I was there. And he has an assistant who, my first year there, 25 years as a part-time assistant, right? Retired Army colonel, just stuck, stayed in central Pennsylvania because him and his wife and loved the area, and that's where they raised their kids. So Coach Barco, he's been there for that long. And then who are his assistants? He has Andrew Springer, who's an alum, part-time assistant who is there for 10 plus years and is now at Stevens up in New Jersey. And then Coach Ocker, who is in his 80s and still running at Penn Relays in the 100, and still training. I mean, he's running 17 point in his 80s. It's pretty darn competitive if you ask me. And Ryan Spear, who was the GA before me, and he was at Baylor for a year and came back. And then Dane Cornelius and Emily Cornelius, I think it was like year 6 for them. And Dane was a multi, and he coaches pole vault, and Emily coaches middle distance there. So I was just surrounded by this like great cloud of coaches who had the D3 experience and so committed to it. And I really fell into an incredible program where there's only one full-time coach on staff and the GA. So as a GA, I got to do a lot. I didn't do any programming per se, but the administrative side and that whole side, getting to see that aspect, that was the side of coaching that I never saw as a student athlete. And I remember texting Vicky at one point and saying, Vicky, I have just such a greater appreciation of everything you went through as a coach after, just being a GA and doing all the administrative work that's involved with it too. And it's so much more than just taking splits at the meet, right? And putting together a good race strategy for cross country, but it's how you manage everything in and out and day to day. And like, we're competing fall, winter, and spring. And for our Division III athletes, at least there at Messiah, our athletes were the ones who wanted to be double majors and double minors. And also like they have senior piano recital this week, and they're in 8 different clubs. And I remember Coach Fogelsinger telling me like our job, at least at Messiah, was way less about motivating our athletes because they're so intrinsically driven, and way more of telling them to breathe and to slow down. And one thing Fogue would say all the time, he got this from one of the previous wrestling coaches, was if the devil can't slow you down, he's going to speed you up. And that was something that, I came back to a lot in my coaching there of like, okay, how are my athletes taking on so many things? And, and they're very talented. They're a conference scorer. They might score 30 points. Like we had a guy who scored 30 points at the conference championship for us. And it's like, hey, like he's a civil engineering student too. And our other guy who's probably going to score like 15 to 20 points is a music major, and he's senior, and he's a student teacher his senior year. And he has recitals going on too. So he's going to have to miss some meets. And how do we work around their schedule and balance everything and still set them up for success on the track too? It was a totally different experience from when I was a student athlete at Montana. And like I could easily build my schedule around it. Whereas when you're at a small university, you just don't have the same flexibility with your schedules. Like this class might be offered every odd year fall semester. And so that sequencing is so important. And the question really became, how can we as track coaches meet our student athletes where they are? And Coach Fogelsinger, he has a roster of 100 kids, 50 cross country runners too. And how does he balance all that? And, also being the only full-time coach, how does he balance that too? And he's just an incredible guy to work under and learn from. And someone I still keep in contact with of just, as I'm, kind of navigating the early years of my full-time coaching experience or coaching career too. And, someone I'll call and pick his brain, quite often.
I've never heard of that saying, if the devil can't slow you down, he'll speed you up. What I heard you say is, so you had these kids at Messiah that were, involved in a lot of things, civil engineering, piano recitals, clubs, things like that. And so track was a part of that. So are you saying like, so your job there was, I think sometimes coaches think that their job is to make sure that the athlete puts track as like their top priority, or maybe second priority, because we're talking about college kids, right? So grades, track, and then maybe down, 3, 4, 5 is track, and then 6, okay, social life maybe, or something like that, or maybe club or something like that. Are you saying with that phrase that your job was to help prioritize where track was, and that it wasn't necessarily always number one, two, three, or maybe even four or five, depending on the kid and their life
Yeah.
goals and things like that?
Yeah, it was more of like our students at Messiah, and I would say here at LeTourneau, and even at when I was at Virginia Wesleyan last year, so many of the students that I've coached at this level, man, like they're just invested in a lot of different parts of campus, and it adds to what makes an enriching, student athlete experience too, like that holistic student experience, right? And how can we make sure that they get an enriching team experience? That's part of the mission statement at Messiah. But how do they get an enriching team experience while also balancing their academics and their social life and their other hobbies, right? Like ideally, we're gonna have athletes who go to class and they come to practice, and that's enough for them. But it was just one of those things that not we have 100 kids on the team. Not everyone's gonna have that same point of view and perspective. There's gonna be a lot of gray area in between, and it's like, okay, how can we meet them where they're at? And also with track and field too, like so. I mean, we had a 5-time national champ and Esther Sealand there at Messiah, ran 202, didn't just go to NCAAs and win NCAAs. Her last year at Messiah, she went to the U.S. Championship. And Esther was a biomedical engineering student. There are less demanding, let's put it that way, less demanding courses of study that a student can take than biomedical engineering. And she was starting center back on the soccer team. She didn't run cross country for us. And so, like, when it got to the spring and soccer's in their non-traditional season, we knew that there were a couple weeks that we wouldn't have Esther because, there was a soccer scrimmage that came up. Her senior year was different because she's done with soccer. But even like with recruiting events and, just other demands of, hey, here's an athlete who is a national caliber athlete, not on the D3 level, but on the US level, getting to USAs. Like, how can we balance her schedule? She came to Messiah not to run track. She came to play soccer. And Messiah men's and women's soccer, storied programs among Division III. And it was a conversation there between Coach Vogelsinger and Esther of like, hey, we can balance this. We can make this work. If this is something that you want to do, we can make it happen. And it's one of those things of our students, they're quick to sign up for different things and different clubs. And that was a conversation that Coach Vogelsinger would say or would have of, hey, we need to remember to breathe. We need to remember to slow down. What are our priorities? And one of my coaches from high school, my first high school coach, Coach Connor, he'd always say, number one is faith and family. Number two is academics. Number three is cross country and track. Like, it needs to be in your top three. And one of my assistant coaches at Virginia Wesleyan, Coach Landry, he would say that, for the college experience, there's three aspects, the social, the athletic, if you're an athlete, and the academic. And you can do two of those really well. And he got that from one of his previous coaches. And that was something that, if you're going to do athletics, you have to be willing to sacrifice either the academic side or the social side. And I think if you do it really well, and this is where I'd point a lot of my athletes to when they're like, Coach, I think I'm barely holding on to my 4.0. I might get a B this semester. It's like, okay, let's take a breath. Let's slow down. Let's look at everything you're involved in. And I would always advocate for between your academics and your athletics, that's where that social piece can really come in. If you invest in your team, you invest in your cohort, your colleagues in your academic program, that's where that social piece can come from. With that being said, our students are going to want to do sometimes different sports and different clubs or different activities, and we have to work with them as that comes up and just try to preach balance more than anything else. And when you start to feel overwhelmed, let's slow down. Let's have a conversation. Maybe we need to take a little bit of a break from track, just for like a week or so, and then come back. But yeah, it's just one of those things that we just try to help them slow down and catch their breath and really think through what all their commitments are, because they're usually just feeling overwhelmed.
The majority of people who get into coaching don't get into it so they can do paperwork. They get into it because they love to be on the track. They love to have their feet in the sand pit. They love to be doing splits, talking about the next cross country course, things like that. I'm impressed that a lot of what you described for Messiah was, okay, I'm doing paperwork. Like so much so that you called Vicky and were like, oh, hey, I had no clue. Thank you. God bless. I had no idea you had to do all this stuff. I'm happy it didn't run you off the profession. But I think maybe that should be more of the grad assistant type.
Hmm.
When you go to become a grad assistant, like you maybe should do more paperwork than quote unquote normal, because that is what, if you really want to get into coaching, I'm sorry, it is not. I don't know what percentage of time would you actually think is coaching. It may be less than 30% when you take into
Yeah,
account all, it's different for every program
sometimes.
and things, but there's a lot of times where our coaches are especially our head coaches are on other hiring committees for other sports when they're there. That takes time. A lot of our coaches are leaders or USTF CCCA presidents and things like that. Those all take time
Hmm.
away from actually being on the track and prescribing workouts and stuff. So I like that was kind of your experience there. When you finish, grad assistants are one of the things that actually has a finite time to it. You can't be a grad assistant for the rest of your life. Some of us through COVID have been an undergrad for a long time, but we eventually got to move on here. Where when you get done with Messiah, what are you, because you're still, you're at a point even after grad work that you could still go another route. Like you could just go and become a math teacher, or you can go back and become a math teacher and a high school coach. Were you solidified in your stance that, yeah, I'm going to become a college coach, or was there still an option to go to the high school side?
That was a conversation between my wife and I of just feeling like this was a passion that the Lord put on my heart. And it felt like He continued to open doors with it. And so we felt like, till it makes sense otherwise, let's see this thing out. We've made an investment, we've gotten a master's degree. At the very least, that master's degree is going to move me, up the pay scale if I decide to go back teaching. That was kind of our backup plan the whole time.
Did
With
you
that being
what was
said,
your master's in math as well?
no, 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 no. My math advisor told me I wasn't good enough at math to do my master's in math. But when I was at UM, it was in intercollegiate athletics leadership.
Okay, I was going to call you the biggest nerd in the world if you also got your grad work in math, man. I was like, good Lord, dude, what's wrong with you? Okay, I love that major. Keep
Yeah,
going. Sorry, I just had to ask. Keep going. Keep going.
yeah. So part of that master's program included an internship. And so I think something I did really well was like I'd send Penn State an email and be like, hey, I have some research to do. Can I interview one of your associate athletic directors? And I got to go up and interview their associate athletic director for facilities and take a tour of the Bryce Jordan Center. Wow, just what an amazing space. And when I was at Messiah, I also ran my mile PR at Penn State's indoor track. It was a good time. It was a really good race. And anyways, but part of that was an internship that you did in the summer between your first and your second year. And so Ryan Spear, the previous GA, and a grad transfer that we had on our team, Brody Byler, both ran for Lipscomb down in Nashville. And my sister's younger brother and his wife, they live down in Nashville. So I sent the coaches an email and asked if they'd be open to having an intern for the summer. And so they were awesome. And Nick Polk and Franz Holmes and Grace and just that whole coaching staff at Lipscomb, they're just all incredible people. And I was only there for 6 weeks, but it was probably six of the most impactful weeks in my coaching career, and certainly my grad program too at Messiah, of just seeing how they operate. And there's still things that the way they operate, they do things like I'm still going back to and thinking about. And Franz is awesome and great person to know at convention because it feels like he knows everybody too. But yeah, it was kind of going through that when we are leaving the GA position and getting to the, as my wife and I refer to as, apply for everything stage. Because yeah, like Jenny Simpson had told me to do to grow my professional network, I had done that, but it wasn't perfect, and it wasn't like people were calling me and offering me jobs when I was a GA. And so yeah, I was just apply for, man, I feel like I remember in the month of March, I applied for like 40 plus jobs in the month of March alone. And it's basically, if it came up, there's an opening, I was applying for it, just because I felt like I needed to put my foot in every single door and see what opened up, and go through the interview process. And there were some that I went through and it just ended abruptly. And it's just the way it goes sometimes. You never know when you're applying for those positions, if they're already decided, if they already have someone in mind, if they're totally open in the search. And what ended up leading to it was I got lunch with the women's soccer coach, Scott Fry at Messiah. As like it's like I think it's like end of March, early April, and he's asking me about jobs and applying. And I was like, oh, I just applied for this job at Virginia Wesleyan. He's like, oh, Virginia Beach. Yeah. The women's soccer coach there used to be one of my assistants. I'll give him a phone call. I think he's the associate AD. And it's just Scott gave him a call, and then a couple days later, I get a phone call from Virginia Wesleyan, and I have a great phone call there. And a week later, I'm down there interviewing, and I get offered the job, and it happened that quickly. And wow, like Andrea and just that whole athletic department there is so talented and just full of great people. And I mean, like, I go down to be the head cross country coach, and then I end up transitioning to be the director of the program because the former director got a job offer that she couldn't turn down. And yeah, I just kind of fell into being the director of a program right after being a GA. It wasn't the way I planned it, wasn't the way I wrote it up. It was just circumstantial. And wow, like, talk about the amount of growth I went through from a place like Messiah, where we hosted the Messiah Invite for track and field, which was a 3-day meet. We hosted that both years I was there. To now I'm hosting a cross country meet, and I'm hosting 3 indoor meets, and not at any facility, but the facility that's going to host D3 nationals. And then I'm also going to host an outdoor meet, and I'm going to host a high school outdoor meet too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like trial by fire a little bit, just got thrown into it, but just the growth of hosting a meet, becoming a meet director, and I have a full-time assistant and leading a coaching staff now. I mean, Kayvonte Scott, he's still the assistant there. I mean, just so knowledgeable of the sport and such a talented decathlete. And just think of like the timing wise, like my perfect assistant coach in that position. And KV and I, like, we still talk and we're really tight. And then you have someone like Richmond Leterio, Dr. Richmond Leterio, who is a full-time physical therapist and just comes back and coaches at his alma mater, and is such a talented long jump and triple jump coach. And yeah, I just fell into such a great situation. And that year at Virginia Wesleyan is a year I'll never forget. And it was a really special year. And we accomplished pretty special things with top 10 performances and school records, and felt like we were setting a different school record every week and getting athletes to nationals, and just kind of being overwhelmed at times with just the success that we had right away. And I think about what my role was, and so much of it coming in being director was what that GA role was at Messiah. Because at Messiah, we had all those assistant coaches. I really didn't get to coach a whole lot until my second year there, when one of the coaches left to go take a position that we were all excited about. So coming into Virginia Wesleyan, like, I had that cross country team as a small group. We ran well. We ran PRs, got some school records as well, come track. And I just really took on a lot of that administrative side so that KV and Richmond could just be open to focus on coaching, and those X's and O's. And wow, I mean, what a crazy year it was. But it was a really special year. And my wife and I loved Virginia Beach, and we loved living there too. And it's not just those coaches on the staff, but then the coaches in the ODAC that I got to know. Like, I mean, between Lynchburg and Washington and Lee and Shenandoah and Bridgewater and Roanoke, and I mean, and all the schools in between in that ODAC, like, we're talking about some heavy hitters in the coaching world. And even like across the river at CNU, Tyler over there, like, all these great coaches that in that year I got to talk to and pick their brains and just hear about their coaching journey as well. It was incredible. It was awesome. And just conversations that I'm so grateful for and that I still come back to today.
What a great example of what I would call real networking. We tend to think, we brought up the convention, and when you're listening to this, convention is over, but we're still a couple of months away from it. And I love, actually, not even a couple of months, right? 6 weeks or so when we're recording this right now. And I love it. It's my favorite time of the year. I call it my Super Bowl. It's the number one thing that I get to do in regards to like trade shows and stuff. We tend to think of networking as like, oh, get to the convention, meet such and such coach, try to get them as a referral for the next job, those kind of things, which is a very selfish activity, right? You're going up to meet someone so that they can do something for you. This example of, yeah, I had lunch with the soccer coach. You didn't have lunch with the soccer coach. You didn't befriend the soccer coach at Messiah because you thought, oh, this guy, he can do something for me. You're track. You're like, what's he gonna, he's not gonna attract people, right? So you befriended him because he was probably just a good person and they were on staff and things like that. You
Hmm.
probably went to lunch not because you heard a former athlete was now at Virginia Wesleyan. You went to lunch like, hey, can I just pick your ear? I'm applying to all these schools. You've seen it. You've had people apply. You were just looking for some advice, and maybe we'll grab some Chipotle or something like that. And then you find out, oh, Virginia Wesleyan, well, former athlete of mine or former coach of mine is now there and the associate AD, but I'll make a call for it. Like that's true networking. When you are befriending someone or getting to know someone, not because of what you think they might be able to do for you, but potentially for what you could do for them, or just to have in each other's circles. That's where real networking comes from. It's not. I tell you what, it is a waste of time, guys and gals, to go to the convention and try to get in front of a Mouse Holloway and shake his hand and hopefully he remembers your name, because he's going to be on your referral list. I'm sorry, Mouse is like, I can't endorse you. I don't know you. And by the way, you're only meeting me so that I
Hmm.
can do something for you. Well, how's that really feel? Like, come on, guys. Like that's not networking, but that's the networking we're taught when we, look at, I don't want to blame social media. When we look at or hear advice, it's typically that go meet someone at convention. It's like, well, you're meeting them for them to do something for you. That's pretty selfish, and that's not what real networking is. So I love that example of what real networking is with the soccer coach there at Messiah. Certainly sounds like you learned a lot at Virginia Wesleyan. There's a little bit of like, oh, I go there to do one job, and I end up having to do this big, enormous job that I'm not prepared for, by the way. But I don't know that we're prepared for anything in the coaching world until we actually do it. So it's that out of the frying pan into the fire. We're like, well, I guess I better figure out how to host these
Hmm.
meets and host these meets at the Virginia Best Beach Sportsplex and how to host these high school meets. Okay, well, we'll figure it out. And uh, really appreciate that you had a good support system with coaches and probably administration there to help out with that as well. So I love that journey. So how does that, really a short amount of time, man. You were talking about 2 years of a GA, a unique GA position where you're doing a lot of the paperwork side of things, and then this. It was 1 year at Virginia Wesleyan, right? If I remember correctly. So this one
Yeah.
year of like, how do
Hmm.
I cram 10 pounds of experience into a 5 pound bag? I said that the nicest way I could, guys. You know exactly the saying I kind of butchered there. How does that all lead to LeTourneau and why? You went from as far west basically as we can go to as about as far east as we could go. You're settling up here in the middle
Hmm.
in Texas. How did that lead to LeTourneau?
So yeah, this is where it just gets really crazy. Um, the first class of master's degree at Messiah was intercollegiate athletics administration, taught by Dr. Sedgel. Dr. Sedgel was an adjunct professor. He was the athletic director at Covenant College. That class was awesome. It was a July intensive. It was a week long. You were in class from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then you had 2 weeks to, write to do your final project afterwards.
Wow.
So that was the first class of my master's degree. It was pretty crazy. Um, One thing Dr. Sedgel said out of that class was to always have a list, because if you're going to be coaching and how you do your job, or you're going to be in athletics leadership, at the end of the year, you're going to get phone calls, you're going to get emails, people reaching out and saying, hey, like, hey, I have this opening, or someone reached out to me about an opening, or just something of like that. And they're going to see if you're interested. And he said, always have a list so that if these schools call, or if this person calls, I'm picking up the phone. Well, knowing that Dr. Sedgwick was an athletic director, it's like, well, he's at the top of my list right there. And I also knew that he was gonna work at somewhere. He was gonna work somewhere that took athletics seriously, and was intentional with how they integrate athletics to the rest of the campus, and also serious about faith integration and Christian discipleship and discipleship in coaching too. From my time at Messiah, that's something I was really excited about and continue to be really excited about. So one thing that happens while I'm at Messiah is I get an email from the AD at George Fox, who is really good friends with the AD at Covenant, Adam Puckett, Tim Sedgel, good buddies. So Adam Puckett reaches out, hey, like could we bring you out for an interview or look at hiring adding a coach to our coaching staff? It's going to be a split position between coaching the 400 and strength conditioning. I'm like, perfect. No kinesiology background. I was a cross country runner. All right. But it's like I'll go out and interview at the least and meet some people and George Fox was a school I was interested in going to from the get-go when I was coming out of high school. So I go out, meet the coaching staff, interview. John Smith, wow. What just an incredible guy and how he approaches the sport, won a national championship, and also just so laid back and loves to surf, and is like he's just so incredible, great mind of the sport and how he runs his team and is intentional about discipleship and faith integration. And he has a roster of 150. How does he balance that? How does he lead his coaching staff too? He was someone I was really excited for. They actually decided to pull the position. They don't offer it to anybody. Adam called me, and we've had some conversations since then. So apologetic of like, I'm sorry we brought you out here. But even that time at George Fox and me and that coaching staff was influential. Well, I'm at Virginia Wesleyan. Tim Sedgel calls me, says, "Hey, we're gonna have an opening." And I've actually left Covenant. I'm now leading a program at LeTourneau. Look up LeTourneau. Do you know anyone who would be interested? And hey, I always have a list, right? Tim Sedgel's calling me. He's at the top of my list. Any school he works at, I'm like, well, I'm interested. And so, they bring me down. I've driven through Texas once, never really stopped in Texas, let alone Longview. But yeah, he brings me down, talks about kind of the state of the program, state of the university, the athletics department, the president of the university, what we're about. President of the university is all about just like over the top hospitality, intentional hospitality, making sure that we take care of anyone who comes on campus. And yeah, it was just one of those things that Dr. Sedgel, professor from my master's degree at Messiah, just ended up calling me 3 years later about, hey man, I have an opening. Would you be interested? Come down and interview, and he offers me the position. And then my wife and I have been in, Longview, Texas for 3 months now, just loving it and feel so connected to campus and the university. And I have three coaches altogether on my staff. So me and my two assistants. And again, like I have a head cross country coach here, Kevin Gideon, who go back to convention. I met at convention when I went. And so we've been good buddies for a couple of years now. Now it's funny that we work together. And my other assistant coach, Brendan Provan, he was a national qualifying athlete in the triple jump at what school? Messiah as well. And I got to hire him and bring him over. And he was someone who wanted to get into coaching and was looking for different opportunities, but was pretty specific on the type of school that he wanted to go to. And took some convincing to pull him down here from Pennsylvania. He's from north of Philly. He's a Philly sports fan through and through. And teams in here. We got Houston. We also have the football team in Dallas, and that's a really hard thing for him to reckon with, being an Eagles fan. But it's one of those things of, just being intentional with who we bring on the coaching staff here and hire here, and doing so in prayer. And I think that just like going back to like what doors are opening for you. And one of those things through the whole journey is like praying that God would open those doors and that I would be able to see those doors when they open. But also, if it's not the right position, that door would slam shut and it would be abundantly clear. And with coming to LeTourneau and everything here, it just kind of felt like those doors kept opening and it made a lot of sense. And hey, we get to go from being a 17-hour drive to a 4.5-hour drive from our family in Mississippi, making the flight to my family in the Northwest. We can fly direct from Dallas. And especially just kind of with, family being a big priority for us, the opportunity to be close to the nephews and the nieces and siblings and parents was something that for my wife and I, we just felt like, yeah, that door was opening and it made so much sense for us to go through it. So, it's been cross country season's gone well here at LeTourneau and about to turn that page completely to track, but we've been in track preseason and just getting to know the team, the area. We're building an indoor track. It's pretty exciting too. has been pretty special coming out here and settling in.
I'm never a big fan of, the terminology dream job, right? Like we've had a couple of coaches say that before, and I'm always like, oh, okay, put a little bookmark. We'll see you 5 and 10 years if you're still there. If it's the dream job, you should be. But also recognizing that things change at a job, right? ADs change. If you're an
Hmm.
assistant coach, your head coaches changes, things like that. So I'm not going to use the terminology dream job here, but it does sound like LeTourneau offered you and your wife, checked a lot of boxes for you guys.
Right.
How how important?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's early in your career, and it's early in your career specifically at LeTourneau, but I'm always interested. A lot of times we take jobs because of the status of the job. And by the way, point and thumbs here. My whole, I was at 5 different places in 10 years. My whole goal was to get to the SEC. It didn't matter what school in the SEC. I just wanted to get to the SEC. That wasn't necessarily healthy, and obviously didn't lead into a long-term career for me. But I'm interested in how do we help coaches have long-term careers first, but then how do we maybe increase the long-termness of each of their stops along the way as well, to hopefully gain a little roots there and not be like this guy here where I'm going to a different place every freaking year, things like that. As you look at it today in your very rookie infancy here at LeTourneau, and you think about those boxes that were checked, how important do you believe those are going to be to hopefully a potential 5, 10? Maybe you recreate coach at Messiah. Maybe it's 30 years from now. I'm interviewing you again and talking about your 30-year career at LeTourneau. How important do you think those boxes that were checked are for long termness and even the short term immediacy of like, oh, I'm happy and my family is happy, and therefore I'm happier and more satisfied in my career at this point?
That's where the family piece really came in, and just proximity to family for us. Um, and I feel like here at LeTourneau, like you said, it checks all those boxes. It's a university that is very intentional about faith integration from top to bottom, right? That is really important. That comes from the board and the president of the university. And then also here in the athletic department too, like we try to take that, match that, if not take it to a higher level. And that comes from the athletic director. So that's where the leadership is so important. I think like commitment to track and field as an institution too, that was a big thing that I wanted to see. Coming from a Division I background from where I competed, I know resources also mean expectations. And so when Dr. Sedgel was telling me about, hey, we're going to build this indoor track, and it's going to be a hydraulic track. It's a venue that, we want it to be a national caliber facility because of unreasonable hospitality, right? We just want to be unreasonably hospitable to everyone that comes on campus, and for our local community, our regional community, our national community. And so I remember talking to the president of the university, Dr. Mason, about, hey, so like where I come from, more resources mean more expectations. Like you're going to build this huge facility for the track and field team. What are the expectations that you have for us? And I'll never forget, Dr. Mason telling me in my interview, like, yeah, like we don't have football here at LeTourneau. He said, who knows? Maybe someday we do, but right now we don't. And he told me, I think track and field can be our football. And that gave me chills as a track and field coach, because I've never heard a university administrator ever put track and field in that kind of spotlight.
No way.
And I think there's a moment of fear where it's like, wow, that like, hey, Dr. Mason, high school quarterback here in the state of Texas, went to Baylor, walked onto the baseball team. Like, he's an athlete. He understands athletics. He's not just any president in that regard. And so for him to say that he thinks
Mhm.
track and field can be our football is like, okay, that's a big undertaking.
Big
But at the
words.
same time, for me, hearing from the president of the university that kind of level of commitment, right? And there's been times, in these 3 months where I've tried to challenge that a little bit, right? Not being like, well, you said we're going to be our football, so this is what we need, but more of like, this is what you said. Did you really mean it? And it's like, hey, like we announced the groundbreaking on the dome, and just the news that, internally about how that dome is going to sit in campus and with facilities and everything like that, and how they want to set up track and field cross country program at LeTourneau, it's been around. We had a guy run at the Olympic trials back in the late 70s, early 80s from our program for cross country, but track and field is real new. And just trying to see it from the president of the university, how he wants to be intentional about all athletic programs, that represent LeTourneau, but also like, hey, this is an area of need. And I mean, my predecessors in the position, Coach Rasky and Coach Van, like they were integral to like the early stages of that dome, and that even becoming something that is a possibility here. And Coach Hood, Don Hood, who was the founder of the program here at LeTourneau, I mean, like Texas, Arkansas coaching legend, especially in the pole vault. Like he, it's just one of those things that this feels like the culminating piece to all their hard work. And like, now I'm getting the baton from them and I get to carry and run with it myself. And, try to lead the program in a way that honors all of their time and effort, honors the intentionality from the president of the university, and, honors the hard work of our athletes too. So the way I see it is like, it works for my family. It's an institution that like my wife and I, we'd want our kids to go to. They're intentional about that faith integration. It, like you said, it checks all that boxes for us. And the way I see it is like, I'm here until the Lord calls me somewhere else. And it feels like for me, like this is everything that we were really looking and praying for. And it feels like, yeah, like until the Lord makes that abundantly clear that we're going somewhere else, we're lockstep right here at LeTourneau. And you look at the examples for me, the role models for me in coaching, right? Jeff Brady at the high school level, he's been there 20 plus years, started coaching around year 2000. His research in college was about integrating computers into math education. And so that tells you how long he's been teaching and coaching there, but it's all been at Tahoma. Brian Schwain, when he's leading that program at Montana, he had been there a handful of years, took a little break to pursue a career as a full-time artist, and he had a studio in downtown Missoula, and then came back to the program. And Vicky had been there a while and too, and she's obviously now at Clemson and doing great things with that program there in her role. And I go to Messiah and Dale, 31 years now, Coach Barco, 27 years as an assistant, and I just really saw what that kind of long-term investment, what it does to a program. You can look at John Smith at George Fox too in that same category. And it's amazing talking to him about just kind of how the program has changed over the years. But yeah, it's like those are the coaches, Tyler at CNU, Jim Jones at Salisbury, and just you could go on and on about all these great coaches who have been somewhere for a long extended period of time and the investment that they've made in the program and how that program really becomes a unique and impactful experience for their student athletes with their time. And like so many of us coaches would say, such a highly impactful time in the lives of our student athletes, those 18 to 22, 23 years. I mean, like it's, you can read a great book about transformational coaching, right? And it's not about what we're getting out of the coach, what we as coaches are getting out of our athletes. That's part of it, but it's really about the way I see it. How are we making impacts on our athletes for the rest of their lives? And being at Messiah, Dale would have an alum from 2005 come back, and he keeps everything in binders. And so he'd be like, oh man, let's go grab the 2006 binder, like the 2005 binder from me. Oh, I'll open it up here. Look at your workouts here, your splits and everything like that. And it was incredible to see someone who graduated almost 20 years ago light up in that regard. And it's special at the end of the day. And that's the type of experience that I want to work to provide for my student athletes. And I know it's not a thing that's done in 3 months or a year or 5 years. It takes a long time to get there. But, that's where I just feel like these were doors that open and the Lord called us here. And it's something that we're trying to do a good job of honoring that and seeing it through.
I love it, man. That's a good place to wrap up. Normally, my wrap-up question is what's got you excited? But you ran us through, man, facilities and building something and the impact, the positive impact that you want to make on the young people that choose to come to your program. It's exciting. Like, I love the people that have poured into you. You mentioned a lot of great mentors and examples for you as a coach. I can't wait to hear, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line when I interview a coach and they're like, I was was an athlete for Coach May, and he talked about X and Y and Z, and it'd be like, yep, that sounds like him. That makes because you stand on the shoulders of others, and now you're building people that will
Hmm.
stand on your shoulders as well by being the example that you put forth to your student athletes there. So it's really cool to see, man, especially at such a young part of your coaching career. I mean, you are, I like to use the analogy of the 400-meter dash, and I'll talk to people about, you may be at the 200-meter mark or things like that. You are still setting your blocks up, and that's a cool thing, man. That's really cool because that means there's a lot of race in front of you. That means there's a lot of positive impact for you to make for our young people out there. So it's really cool to see, man. I'm just so glad that you would share that journey with us today on the podcast.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much. This was really great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Coach May, for being here. We're going to be watching. This is, we're in the future. It's 2025. So we've already had maybe an indoor meet or two, but we're excited to see beyond what the athletes run and jump and throw and things like that. The actual impact is what is the real meat of what coaching is. And so we're going to be excited to watch along on the sidelines. Thank you guys for being here and Press and Play today. Always humbled that you would do that for us. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again and have some fun. See you guys.